How do you steal £649,000 from the government using nothing but a standard office login? You trust your HR department with your home address, your bank details, and your ID. You have to. But for 107 employees at Transport for London, that trust was a death sentence for their finances. Today, we're looking at the chilling case of the TfL insider who turned her own colleagues into human ATMs to fund a spiraling gambling addiction. And the one mistake that led investigators straight to her front door. The scheme was breathtakingly simple in its execution. This is what I call the ultimate workplace betrayal. Meet Luciana Akanbi and Femi Akanbi. To their neighbours, they were a struggling family of 5. To the law, they were the masterminds behind a sophisticated money laundering network that hijacked the lives of 107 innocent transport workers. They thought they found the perfect crime when they accessed Transport for London's internal systems and stole personal data from over 100 employees. What they did next with that information would turn a simple data breach into Britain's most audacious tax fraud scheme, netting them over £500,000 before investigators caught onto their digital trail. For 4 years, she sat alongside them. She knew their names, their faces, their routines. She attended the same briefings, used the same staff kitchen, nodded hello in the same corridors. By every measure that mattered, Luciana Akanbi was exactly what Transport for London believed her to be. A trusted employee, reliable, unremarkable, doing her job. What her colleagues didn't know was that by 2021, Luciana had started using that trust as a weapon against them. Working as a business service call advisor in TfL's HR department, Luciana had legitimate access to the organization's internal staff records. Names, addresses, national insurance numbers, passport details, bank account information. The kind of data that, in the wrong hands, doesn't just cause inconvenience, it destroys people's financial lives. And Luciana Akanbi had already decided exactly what she was going to do with it. Between September 2021 and January 2022, she systematically harvested the personal records of 107 of her own colleagues. Then she and her husband Femi began filing fraudulent tax rebate claims to HMRC in those colleagues' names. 139 of them, totaling just under £649,000. The judge who sentenced them called it the worst data breach in Transport for London's history. This is how they did it, how they were caught, and why the detail that finally emerged in court was more chilling than anything investigators had initially anticipated. To understand why Luciana Akanbi did what she did, you have to go back to the pandemic. Femi Akanbi, 51 years old, had been hospitalized with COVID during the crisis years. The illness hit the family hard. But what followed was arguably worse. During the long period of recovery and financial uncertainty, Femi developed a serious gambling addiction, and it was quietly hollowing out the family's finances from the inside. By 2021, the pressure had become acute. The couple had 3 children, bills weren't going away, and Femi's gambling debts were accumulating faster than their income could cover them. Luciana, by then 4 years into her role at TfL, had access to something that most people in financial trouble don't. She sat inside one of Britain's largest public transport organisations, with legitimate credentials to view the private records of hundreds of her colleagues. She could see, at a glance, everything HMRC would need to process a tax rebate: name, NI number, employer details, bank account, passport number. The plan, prosecutors told Woolwich Crown Court, required significant planning and was sophisticated in nature. But its foundation was deceptively simple. If you already have someone's real identity, their real employment history, and their real tax details, you don't need to fabricate very much at all. You just need to submit the claim and wait for the money to arrive. What the Akanbis did next would drain over £433,000 from the public purse. But what investigators uncovered about where that money went would raise questions that went far beyond a desperate family in financial freefall. From that pool of 107, the records of 40 employees were selected and used to build fraudulent identities. Self-assessment accounts were created in those employees' names. HMRC's tax rebate system, designed to return money to working people who have overpaid, was then used as the mechanism for theft. Using 38 different computer devices from their home in Dartford, Kent, and from other locations, Luciana and Femi, along with others, submitted 139 fraudulent rebate claims across the following months. The claims totaled just under £649,000. HMRC paid out just over £433,000 before the fraud was identified. The 40 employees whose data was actively used had no idea any of this was happening. They were going about their lives while someone they'd sat alongside at work was filing tax claims in their names, redirecting the proceeds through a complex money laundering network. Investigators found that over £50,000 from the fraud had gone directly into gambling accounts, feeding the addiction that had driven the scheme in the first place. The judge noted that the money was almost instantly dissipated, with nothing left to recover by the time the case reached court. There were, however, signs that the couple had also attempted to move some of the proceeds into longer-term investments, including property purchases and ISAs, in an apparent attempt to legitimize what they'd stolen. Whether that represented the full picture of where the money went was a question the court could not fully answer, given the complexity of the money laundering network through which it had passed. What was beyond doubt was the damage done to the people whose identities had been hijacked. For the 40 TfL employees whose data was actively used, the fallout didn't arrive all at once. It arrived as a letter from HMRC, an unexpected tax investigation, a rejected credit application, a credit score that had inexplicably collapsed. The sudden discovery that, in the eyes of the financial system, things had happened in their names that they had never authorized and had no way to immediately explain. Damage made worse by the fact that it had come from someone those victims had worked alongside and had no reason to distrust. The wider impact on TfL's HR department was significant as well. Prosecutors told the court that Luciana Akanbi's colleagues, some of whom had their own data accessed even if it wasn't used in a claim, were subjected to additional checks and procedures that lowered morale and created an atmosphere of profound distrust in the department where she had worked for years. But while the investigation was establishing the scale of the human damage, something else was quietly coming together: the digital trail that Femi and Luciana had left behind. The question was how two people operating from a residential address in Dartford, using 38 separate devices and a layered money laundering network, had ultimately been identified, traced, and brought before a court. The answer involved a piece of investigative work that Luciana, for all her apparent planning, had not accounted for. But it was what happened after the arrest that provided one of the most striking moments of the entire case. Faced with the evidence against her, Luciana Akanbi told investigators that her husband's cousin, a man who worked in the IT industry, might have been the one responsible for accessing the TfL data. She was, in effect, attempting to redirect blame onto an innocent member of her own family. The suggestion did not hold. The prosecution proceeded, and on the day of sentencing at Woolwich Crown Court, neither Luciana nor Femi Akanbi was in any position to argue their way out of what the evidence had already established. His Honour Judge David Miller sentenced both Luciana and Femi Akanbi to 3 years and 9 months in prison each. In his remarks from the bench, H.J. Miller set out the full weight of what they had done. A trusted employee had abused the confidence placed in her by her employer and her colleagues. A fraud had been executed that was sophisticated in nature, required significant planning, and left real people dealing with real damage to their financial lives. He noted that Femi Akanbi had come under financial pressure following his gambling addiction, and acknowledged that both defendants had worked hard to look after their children. Neither circumstance was sufficient to alter the sentence. As for the money, the £433,000 that had flowed out of HMRC and into a money laundering network, the judge made no confiscation order. "I cannot get blood from a stone," he said. The couple, both Nigerian nationals, were told they may be liable for deportation, a matter the judge confirmed was not for him to determine. Richard Mullings, head of counter-fraud and corruption at TfL, said the organisation welcomed the sentencing. He noted that hundreds of thousands of pounds had been taken from the public purse, money that could not be reinvested for the wider public benefit, and confirmed that TfL had since introduced stronger measures to restrict access to personal staff data and ensure it could not happen again, including enhanced authentication protocols and real-time monitoring of sensitive system activity. HMRC issued a statement warning that the case should serve as a notice to anyone who tries to undermine the tax system that they can and will be pursued. For the 40 people whose identities were borrowed without their knowledge or consent, the process of clearing their names had already been underway for some time. Luciana Akanbi had worked at Transport for London since 2017. For 4 years, she was unremarkable. For 5 months, she was something else entirely. Researching these cases and making the videos takes hours. Your likes, comments and follows are the caffeine that keeps me going. It is completely free for you and means the world to me. Please hit the follow button and help me grow.